Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. You know, when a plant in the garden starts struggling, we're talking yellowing leaves, weak spindly stems, or just tiny fruit, our first instinct is to blame exactly what we can see. But here's the thing, the real story of plant vitality, it almost never happens in the leaves. It's happening entirely underground. Today, we're going to dive into a quiet, hidden biological engine that literally dictates everything about how plants survive and thrive. And the absolute best part? The secret to turning this engine on isn't found in some high-tech chemical lab. It's actually sitting right in your kitchen. So what if I told you that a $1 kitchen staple could actually triple your harvest? I know, it sounds like a massive exaggeration, right? Like one of those internet gardening hacks that doesn't actually work. But what we're going to unpack today is deeply rooted in modern plant science. We are talking about triggering root growth so intense that scientists have recorded massive biomass increases. And you can pull this off with a simple, ordinary ingredient that is probably just chilling in your cupboard right now, waiting to be woken up. Usually, when our plants need a boost, we tend to rely on brute force. We go out and blast the soil with traditional commercial fertilizers, just dumping raw nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium onto the dirt. But there is a completely different way to approach this, called biological reorganization. Instead of just force-feeding the plant, this method actually reshapes the meeting point between the soil and the root. It helps the plant absorb what the soil already holds, but it does it far more efficiently, gently, and sustainably. So it's not about adding more raw material. It's about making the existing material beautifully, naturally accessible. All right, so what is this miraculous trigger? Get ready for this. It's just ordinary baker's yeast. Yep, the exact same beige, powdery stuff you'd use to bake a loaf of bread. Inside a single teaspoon of this stuff live literally millions of tiny, sleeping workers. Now, on their own, sitting in a jar, they're completely harmless and dormant. But the very second they touch warm water and just a whisper of sugar, this incredible transformation begins. They wake up, they come alive, and they kickstart a process that is far more important to your garden than rising dough. When that yeast wakes up and snacks on that tiny bit of sugar, it releases an absolute surge of nutrition. It's literally a payload of B-complex vitamins, essential amino acids, and plant-ready enzymes. And these aren't just random nutrients, by the way. These are the exact molecules a plant needs to build new cells and repair its tissue. Think of it kind of like delivering pre-cut construction materials straight to a job site. The plant doesn't have to waste any extra energy processing them. Plus, it provides almost every essential mineral a plant searches its entire life for. Stuff like nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, and zinc. And as it ferments, the yeast also churns out these natural compounds that mimic vital plant hormones. You can kind of think of them as green traffic lights for your plants. First up, we have auxins. These little guys whisper to the roots underground, basically telling them to go, grow, and branch out, sending fresh white root tips splitting right into the soil. But at the exact same time, we have cytokinins. These travel upward into the plant, ensuring that the leaves and stems actually keep pace with that massive explosion happening down below. So what you get is this beautifully harmonious full-body growth response. All right, this brings us to one of the absolutely most astonishing discoveries in modern plant science, the rhizophagy cycle. For decades, we thought roots were basically just passive drinking straws, quietly sipping up dissolved nutrients. Well, we were completely wrong. Roots are active hunters. It's a microscopic feeding frenzy. When living microbes, like the yeast from our brew, approach the root tips, the plant literally pulls the entire living microbe inside its own cells. It strips away the yeast's outer walls, extracts the nutrients, and then, this is the crazy part, it pushes the surviving microbes back out into the soil to recover. And as they exit, they trigger fresh root hair growth. It is just a brilliant, self-sustaining biological engine. So, what does this microscopic feeding frenzy actually achieve in the real world? Well, in controlled greenhouse trials, plants treated with simple living yeast water saw root biomass increases approaching 30%. 30%. That is a massively larger stomach and a way stronger foundation for the plant. And it doesn't stop there. Yield studies have found fruit weights and spikelet counts jumping up by 20 to 28%. This isn't magic, folks. It's just what happens when biology is actually allowed to do what biology does best. But here is the really cool part. The benefits aren't just for the plant itself. This actually profoundly changes the ground beneath our feet. When yeast wakes up in the dirt, it secretes EPS, which stands for extracellular polymer substances. I know, it's a mouthful, but it's essentially nature's invisible bioglue. If you have tired, sandy soil where water just slips right through and disappears, EPS is a total game changer. This sticky, gentle substance clings to tiny particles of sand and silt, and it physically binds them together into stable crumbs or aggregates. It is quite literally rebuilding the structure of your soil. Because of that bioglue, the earth essentially transforms into what we call a biological sponge. This glued together soil structure creates this wonderful protective cocoon. Instead of rejecting water, the soil absorbs it and holds onto it. It creates these tiny little pockets of light where microbes can thrive, and moisture sticks around long after the sun sets. This sponge-like environment is incredibly resilient. It protects delicate young seedlings from harsh heat waves or short droughts because those roots are constantly cushioned in a stable, moisture-retaining structure. Okay, so I know you're probably eager to figure out exactly how to make this stuff. And listen, precision here is absolutely crucial. It's a kindness to the biology. Step 1, start with a liter of warm water, right around 105 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's too hot, you'll kill the yeast. Too cold, and it just stays asleep. Step 2, add 2 tablespoons of dry baker's yeast and just 1 single teaspoon of sugar to act as the ignition fuel. Step 3, stir it up, cover it with a breathable cloth, and let it sit for about 30 to 40 minutes until it gets nice and frothy. And a quick warning here, never ever seal it tight. The carbon dioxide pressure will literally burst the container, and you will be scraping yeast off your ceiling. Finally, step 4, and this is the most critical part, you must dilute this concentrate with clean water at a 1:10 ratio. If you skip the dilution, the intense concentrate can actually cause osmotic shock, pulling moisture away from those delicate roots. Dilution turns it from a stressor into pure, usable nourishment. Now that you've got your diluted mix, when exactly do you use it? Well, this timeline is absolutely ideal for crops like tomatoes, beans, cucumbers, and strawberries. You're going to want to apply it right at the base of the plant, once when the seedlings establish, once at flowering, and then once again when the fruit actually begins to set. But, and I cannot stress this enough, here is the most imperative rule. You must use this brew fresh, within a few hours of making it. This tonic is alive, it doesn't have a shelf life. If you wait around, the spark fades, and the biological magic simply slips away. To really ground these numbers in reality, let me share a story from the source material about a gardener named Joe. Late in the summer, Joe was staring down at his dying tomatoes. The leaves were yellowed out, the stems were drooping, and the blossoms just absolutely refused to open. We've all been there, right? It's a deeply relatable moment for anyone who's ever tried to grow anything. He looked at those sad, struggling plants and thought, well, maybe next year. He was literally ready to rip them all out. But instead, as a total last-ditch effort, he decided to try the yeast brew. The results of his little experiment were honestly astonishing. Within just a few days, Joe noticed these thin, white feeder roots pushing up right near the soil surface. By the end of the week, the stems had completely firmed up. And by the end of the month, get this, he harvested 4 pounds of fresh tomatoes from plants he'd entirely given up on. Just a teaspoon of life, properly activated, completely reversed the fate of his garden. No way, right? But it works. And as a really brilliant bonus, this yeast brew is doing way more than just pushing growth. It's actually creating a biological shield. Because baker's yeast is technically a harmless fungus, when you introduce it to your soil, it rapidly multiplies and physically crowds out the dangerous fungi. It basically acts like a microscopic bouncer, keeping out the bad guys that cause gray mold, blight, and root rot. On top of that, its mere presence triggers systemic resistance. It naturally prepares and strengthens the plant's own immune system, teaching it to fight off diseases more effectively on its own. It's just gentle, natural resilience. Zooming out for a second, when we look a little closer at this whole incredible plant ecosystem, you start to realize it directly mirrors our own human health. Just as trillions of microbes help a plant stand strong against drought and disease, our own human microbiome shape our immunity, our digestion, and our overall vitality. When we choose natural, biological paths instead of harsh, chemical, quick fixes, whether that is out in the garden soil or in our own daily dietary routines, we are building deep, sustainable resilience. The source text actually featured this really beautiful, profound quote, "We are billion-year-old carbon." It is such a great reminder that we, just like the soil and the plants we tend to, are part of this endless, massive cycle of growth, aging, and renewal. It teaches us that even in the late seasons of the year, or honestly the late seasons of our own lives, there is always potential waiting quietly beneath the surface. Sometimes, it just needs the right care and a gentle biological spark to explode back into purpose. So I want to leave you with this one question to think about. What nourishment will you choose today to shape the harvest you gather tomorrow? Whether you are feeding the soil in your backyard, feeding your body, or feeding your mind with new knowledge, the structures you support today absolutely dictate your vitality tomorrow. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep growing, and I'll catch you next time.